Hi, my name is Venkatesh Hariharan. I am the Public Policy Director for FOSS United, which is an organization that aims to grow the free and open source software ecosystem in India. Uh, I'm very happy to welcome you to the podcast today, which is called United by FOSS. And this is the first of a series of podcasts of people who are leaders in the world of free and open source software. Today, we are very happy to have Andrew Bastin, who is the Chief Technology Officer of Hoppscotch, which is a leading open source software being built out of Kerala, India, and which is becoming very popular across the world. Hoppscotch has got about 54,000 stars on GitHub. It's a leading API testing platform which is growing in great popularity. And in today's discussion, we will explore areas about how to grow the open source ecosystem, how to grow an open source business out of India. And with that, Andrew, thanks for joining us. It's
Thank
a
you.
pleasure to have you on this podcast, especially the first one. You are 22 years old. You're, one of the interesting entrepreneurs in the open source ecosystem emerging out of India. So, tell me a little bit about your origin. You started off by calling the project Post Women, and later on you renamed it as Hopscotch.
Yeah.
How did the idea for building Hopscotch come about? And
Yeah. So a very quick explanation for it is the project was started by Elias. He's the founder. And Elias basically just graduated out of his college and he landed his first job. And with him, with the starting salary and stuff, he had a very weak computer, right? And basically, even at the current point, the API development market is basically focused towards Postman, and and it's a very heavy app, and that's a very common complaint about the app. And Lias couldn't run it amongst the dev environment, the core editor, and everything. With everything written in Electron these days, everything just consumes like gigabytes of memory, and he couldn't kind of run it. So he had an idea, which was, what if this all ran in the browser? Because we always have the browser open as developers. We look at documentation, we look at live running things, and what if your API testing tool was just another window? And that's where the project started. The name is just basically came out of
it's like an inside joke.
It's an inside joke, little bit play on gender norms and stuff like that.
And then, why did you change it to Hopscotch?
Oh yeah. So the project started just as it's similar to how, for example, Linux started, where Elias had this idea and he built like an MVP for sort of things which worked for him in like 2 days or so, and he made it open source and he made it public on GitHub, and no one expected it to kind of, even him didn't expect it to kind of grow to that level. And when it started growing, we started, thinking really seriously about, the name. At that point was a joke, but in the real world, you have consequences for that. So one thing is we are building somewhat like a competitive product, and we are basically infringing on the trademark. That's again something which you can dispute, where you are using the likeness of another brand to promote yourself. So we want to kind of kind of shift away from that. Along with that, we don't wanted our identity to no longer be associated with Postman as is. We have a couple of things which we want to kind of do very differently compared to them. And so we just don't want to become, that open source alternative of product Y.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, did you know Lias in college? How did you become part of the Hopscotch project?
Oh yeah. So that is actually a funny story. This is a proper I didn't know the years before this thing. So meanwhile, I was actually doing the paperwork because I was planning to do my bachelor's in Canada, and my admission and stuff was all done, but I was waiting for a couple of paperwork to come. So that is during the time when Elias open sourced the project, and I was going through the news and stuff, and he had made like an announcement post regarding it. I saw that, I used it, I found the idea pretty interesting, and I felt like it. When I tried to use it, I felt like there were some things which were lacking in it. So I kind of worked towards adding a couple of things. So I was the first contributor to it. I really, one of the things in my first contribution, it's literally ticket number 1, in which I have written in the bottom is this may be the first contribution to possibly many.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I see that you have 54,600
Yeah.
stars on
Yeah.
GitHub, which is quite a good number. And I also see that you have global contributors. I see people from all across the world as listed on your contributors page. So how has it become so popular, and what are the lessons in that for other open source projects?
Yeah. So to be honest, we don't know exactly why. We do attribute a lot of it to there was a problem needing to be solved, and a lot of people resonated with the idea. And we basically came up with the solution, and we stuck to what we meant. We every time we even think about any decisions which we take, we look at the core tenets which we are trying to follow, and we see if it kind of goes with that. And there was a space for FOSS in this market, basically. And most of it is that. And then whenever we build stuff, even if we took a lot of time to do things, we made sure we polished it a lot as much as possible, and and actually ship it that way. So that we slowly started having people who were not even developers or not even core audiences which we thought about actually using the tool, because it was like pretty reliable to use.
Okay, so you mentioned core tenets, and what I hear from you is that reliability, shipping a polished product is one of the core tenets that you have. What are the other core tenets that Hoppscotch has?
Yeah, so again, we have this thing inside called the Hoppscotch Manifesto, which I had given a talk about before. But Hoppscotch Manifesto basically deals with being open, being is reachability, basically allowing anyone to use the platform, to make sure you keep your requirements low, you build it for everyone so that it's accessible to everyone. And that means in every sort of way. So it's like if it's your experience in this space, if you're a beginner to you're somewhat of a seasoned professional, we want to try to kind of get around all of those things. And then we call it basically the ecosystem effect. This is something which you're kind of trying to build up, where instead of just one tool, we want to build a suite of tools around all of the around together as like a shared package that seamlessly work with each other, so that we can help you go through from the ideation process to actually the execution to maintaining things. Right? So our vision is basically to kind of go in that direction, and that is our basic tenets for the most part.
Okay, so you now been you started around 2019. The project itself started in 2019. You raised venture capital in 2021 December. Give me a sense of the range of people who use Hoppscotch today.
Yeah, so we have had like very funny, very not funny, very interesting sort of things. So we see a couple of people. We see a couple of people who make content in YouTube, and sometimes we search for Hoppscotch and see, okay, what do people do? And one thing we landed on was in the US, they have like APIs, open APIs for library management, like government information and that sort of stuff. And actually, there are these librarians who ask to kind of support their information stuff. They use Hoppscotch to basically, when they build applications to do this, these are librarians, right? And they test the APIs out on their space and then build like low-code platforms around it. And so we have people like those. Two, we have individual people who just want to play around and do things. Two, we have companies of varying sizes using Hoppscotch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I am in the market looking for an API testing platform, why should I come to Hoppscotch vis-a-vis other alternatives that are there?
Yeah. So currently, a very big thing which we are also working towards is Hoppscotch is right now self-hostable. which means amongst the other API platforms, we have other solutions where you can maybe work with file systems for this thing. But if you want like a centralized collaborative thing, but at the same time you want it in your premise, which is actually a requirement no one in the platform, no one in the space is actually tackling. So we saw that this is a space. We heard it from a lot of contributors that this is something they want, and we have been working with a lot of people to try to get that going. And that's one of the main reasons. So if you want a centralized place where your entire organization can do things, but that centralized instance being controlled by you is the main thing.
Okay.
And again, it's also the other factors, which is we are open source. We are actively improving a lot of things and that sort of stuff. One of the things we were kind of known for, we have been slacking off it a little bit as per growth, but one thing we have been working towards is trying to kind of incorporate everyone's requests into the app in a seamless way as possible. So we have heard a lot of people basically acclaim how fast and things we kind of resolve issues and stuff.
So that brings me to the next logical question. You know, why did you choose to be open source? Because I think some of your competitors are proprietary. And do you feel that, you know, being open source gives you some competitive advantage over and above, you know, the other people in the landscape?
Yeah. So one of the things we have seen is being open source is how the project started, and it is not just the sheer like act of it being open source. It's also being part of the community and having like individual people look at things, be able to look at things and suggest their own improvements. I mean, if Hoppscotch or then Postwoman were an open source, I don't think I would be here, right? And it is a community-driven project, and it was a community-driven project at least, and it has its things. So when people want stuff, people come together and build stuff, right? And it is basically benefiting everyone together. And
so give me an example of, you know, how the community comes together to build better software. You know, you gave your own example. You know, your issue number 1 was raised by you. You said that, you know, there is some feature missing. I want to add that. So how have others contributed? How has it, you know, made it a better tool for end users?
Yeah. So it is all, for example, a couple of people in my team were actually directly contributors, where they were using the app in their works. And they saw, okay, there are like tiny things which I want here, which is not offered by you. Okay, but here is a contribution. Like I have played around with the code. Here is the contribution. Can you just add it in? I review it and basically commit it. And that's how the project basically started. And you know, one of the blessings is we are building a tool for developers who also know how to build this tool. So usually it really, whatever they come up with is really interesting because as my work shift, before I was really into the API testing thing, and even now I do, but now since my focus is more towards building this app, I don't think I will necessarily be able to at all times be able to think in the user's perspective. So when the users themselves actually come up with ideas or we brainstorm across ideas, we have seen that again, it's like the end user thing where, you know, the end user builds the product for themselves. We have had a couple of phenomena like that going on, which there are some not.
Can you give me some examples? The reason I ask is because there is a professor of MIT called Eric von Hippel, and he wrote a book called User-Driven Innovation. And he actually talks about how some of the leading innovations, things like, for example, fault-tolerant computing, was designed by banks because they needed heavy uptime, you know, incredibly strong uptimes, because you can't have ATM machines fail, etc., etc. So, and you know, in that book, it's a fairly old book by now, but he also held out open source software as an example of user-driven innovation. So, give me a couple of examples of, you know, how your community solved the problem for themselves.
Yeah. We have had a long set of vision for the things we build. So usually in our case, I think it's also kind of unique in our case where community basically steps in. It's usually as a placeholder for situations where we have seen it in two ways, where either A is where we have an idea, but it's more of like a long goal, and we are not planning to kind of implement it fully into the platform right now. So usually the people who are kind of depending on this kind of builds their own things. Yeah. Things right now. So one example was when we were working on self-hosted, there were certain set of users which we couldn't support at that moment, and then what happened was there was a community which sprung around that, whom basically maintained their own version of Hoppscotch where they kind of patched it for them, and then they also worked with us to basically share the knowledge and understand, okay, how can we kind of better collaborate with each other. And with that, we eventually in the release we shipped just last August, we were able to kind of incorporate their needs into the thing as well. So
basically there was features that you wanted to build that were there in the roadmap, but at that point in time you didn't have the bandwidth to build it out.
Yeah.
And there were people from the community who said that we are interested in this is a feature that's important to us, so we'll work on it.
Yeah, they will work on it, and they will be able to kind of incorporate it. And that is also kind of better for us because sometimes, because we actually see the perspectives are a little bit different between contributors and us. So for us, one example is we have to think about the product as a whole, see how the whole thing kind of like gels together. And when contributors think, they think in terms of an individual problem, like maybe in the workflow, these things. Now, both are not exclusive of each other, right? Both are important, and sometimes each other loses the sight of each other. So for us, the community has always been this way where they are able to correct us and we are able to correct them, to kind of like, okay, we have a plan in mind for this. This is what you're going to be building. You guys can help us build with that. Here's the idea we have. And at the same time, the team will be like, okay, you guys can do this better, and reach out to us and give the feedback itself.
So what is the percentage of code for Hoppscotch that comes from the community vis-a-vis, contributed by the internal Hoppscotch team?
These days it's pretty less. I would say the project's maturity kind of made it so its accessibility to the code base is pretty limited right now. We are working towards that. It is a mission we are slowly striving to, but it's just currently it's a little bit of a low priority because we have a team to kind of work on things, and we have been focusing towards kind of iterating really fast. And for that, we are kind of sacrificing the ability the accessibility to the code right now, but we have been active on our communities to help people if they want to get onboarded into the platform, they want to understand how the platform works, and help building the PRs, that sort of stuff.
So just to be clear, what you're saying is right now most of the code comes from the internal team.
From the team right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But in the early days, it used to be the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah. At one point, I had more code on the app than Lias.
Okay. So one question I have for you is, and if I look at my former employer, Red Hat, they had a neat split between the project and the product. So you have Fedora, which is an open source project, a new release every 6 months, and lot of innovation, especially user-driven innovation happening there. Technologies like virtualization, etc., were built in that, and then you have the product, which is the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which has got a 18-month release cycle, which has got roadmaps which align the hardware vendors and the independent software vendors, the database vendors, middleware vendors, etc. So you have two very different engines. One where you can do rapid iteration innovation, the other which is rugged product development, deployment, bulletproof. So have you considered doing this kind of a split between the product and the project?
Yeah. So yeah, this is something which we are focusing on recently. Hoppscotch, we announced our enterprise edition just last August again, and the enterprise edition is, as I said, we are kind of focusing towards that model where we have a community edition where the community actively brings in. It's more of like an open core model where the community edition basically stands as the foundation for enterprise, whereas enterprise kind of gives more features or more things along with assurances and supports from our end to kind of like build and maintain the platform. So it's more designed for that.
Okay. And are there any features in the enterprise edition which are not available in the community edition? How do you kind of?
Yeah. So so currently the project just started and we released like the initial iteration of it. So it is so we have a couple of things like enterprise authentication, that sort of stuff is what we do right now as a distinction. But we are planning. Our plan is to keep. So one of the things with Hoppscotch is it is a for an individual, it is a very simple platform to use, even if you are using some of the advanced set of features, right? But also because of that, the problem is we can't really focus on depth of the features, right? Because more depth means we are putting more options to the users, and that is more difficult for beginners to approach, right? So one of the things is we want to see this as a clear distinction. So the advanced sort of features are required for people who actually do serious work on the platform or on their platforms, and we are basically planning to divide it so that the community edition is always going to be minimal and that sort of stuff for the individual users. Doesn't mean there won't be features or anything. It's just whenever the features are there, we always take in consider this is for like an individual user or like a set of small team where they don't need to worry about a lot of things. And for the enterprise edition, we'll have like all the bells and whistles open, right? We find this as a really good distinction because this actually helps us in both ways, where the core app which people get onboarded to is like super easy to use and get introduced to, and when things get serious, they can just upgrade it to a notch.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how does Hoppscotch make money? Have you started generating revenues?
Yeah. So we had just started again. The release happened on August, and that's when
Release of the enterprise.
enterprise edition just started on August. The community edition and the sort of stuff is fully free and open source. So we have that going on over there. We have just started getting into that journey, so it's a little bit early to say, but we have had reached out to around 100 or so companies have reached out to us and asked basically how things are going. We are in talks with them over the past weeks. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And I also noticed that you have raised money about $3 million from OSS Capital in December 2021. How did that happen? Did you reach out to them? Did the VCs reach out to you? And do you see any differences in the fundraising process for an open source company vis-a-vis an e-commerce or a fintech? Is the process different?
Yeah. Again, I'm not very into that space, so I won't be able to give much. So in our case, the representatives from OSSC, they reached out to us initially. The conversation started happening around 2020 and 2021 or so. And the conversation
So it took about a year to mature.
Yeah.
Okay.
But between the conversation starting and us taking it that seriously, I mean, we weren't actually really planning on going on this route. We wanted to keep it as like a project where the community kind of gets into, because the generating money part is a more complicated equation there. And as engineers, we are not exactly, or it's not something what we specialize in, right? And but then what you started seeing was the project started growing like immensely, right? Which is why they reached out to us. It's like, hey, this is the situation which is going to happen. The project is going to reach out, and it's just 2-3 people just maintaining the platform, where the other people just coming in and going. So that's where the thing basically started, and we really thought hard about it, and then we decided, yeah, for the project as a whole to kind of get better, we need more resources into it. And that's when we kind of we entertained the idea of, okay, yeah, we can go for like funding and that sort of stuff. And OSSC guys, they reached out to us and asked, but a couple of other people also asked. I don't remember their names on top of my head, but a lot of people did reach out for seed capital. And it was an interesting thing with OSSC. One of the things we really appreciated was, again, it's not just the money, it is the network they provide. And also, as investors, they have been really helpful in guiding us, because the partners in OSSC are also people who went through kind of the same phase. So for us, people who are with minimal management background, it has been really, really helpful and really eye-opening to kind of go on this journey with them. And they were also like pretty understanding. So that's like one of the best decisions we have taken in terms of going for the VC, because again, they understood us and they have gone through our same things. So, and along with that, the network they provide, the people they provide for us to communicate with are all the same people who basically are among their projects basically just going through the same journey.
So that's good to hear, because I think it's not often that you hear such, good praise for the VCs.
Yeah.
So I think that's good to hear. But for you personally, as a techie, how steep has the learning curve been on the business side? Your co-founder Liaz is also a techie.
Yeah,
So
yes,
for
the founders.
So for both of you, how steep has the learning curve been?
Yeah, it's been insane. I was able to kind of get shielded a little bit because, again, one thing we decided was, one person should look at the business side and the other person should look at the engineering side of things. So between me and Lias, we cleanly splitted the things. I was like, Lias, you can look after the business sort of stuff, but we are still pretty young. So Lias still takes part in somewhat day-to-day engineering things, at least more on the product and design, that sort of stuff, where we can kind of improve on that. But as the priorities shift, it's the divide is basically starting to happen, where Lias is not able to kind of do that these days. And I don't really think in terms of business stuff these days either. I know the objectives which we want to kind of do. Lias sets up the goals. I figure out how to execute it. And we are trying to, when you're trying to kind of move fast, you automatically start to, I call it robotification, where you have like clear objectives and clear goals you want to kind of get to, and you just try to see how you can like maximize that. Yeah.
So on the technology side, how big is your team? How do you operate? And how do you manage the team?
So we are currently a team of around 10 engineers.
And they were all hired after the venture capital came in.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I had.
You're distributed as
Yeah. So we are because it started out as an open source project. We wanted to kind of keep it as a remote, this sort of stuff. We wanted to kind of go with that, and it has worked semi well so far. One of the things with remote is communication is insanely hard, and management is, for an engineer, getting into management is pretty difficult. Again, the only solution is talk to people, and talk to people who have gone through it, and you will basically understand what needs to be done. And also just be like, when your team says something, just listen. That's actually surprisingly rare.
Yes, it is. I think the art of listening is. So with a remote team, how do you plan to scale up? I mean, as you kind of expand and hire more people who work remotely, I think it is definitely a serious challenge. I've heard other CTOs talk about the challenge of managing a remote team. So how do you plan to kind of sort that out in the next few?
Yeah, so this is actually at a very interesting time point where we are actually evaluating the remote aspect of things. So we are running an experiment where we are getting all of the team basically in a single place and try to just go offline and see, everyone says the grass is always greener on the other side. We just want to see what the other side looks like, see if it fits us. And then basically getting that aspect. If we do get on online things, we had to really figure out the main problem with what happens during remote, which breaks down, is communication. Now there are playbooks which are written by a lot of companies, like GitLab is one of them, which for better or worse kind of like works. Everyone has gripes with GitLab things alongside praises, and for a lot of people remote works, right? It's not because, like, if you're having this discussion, that's because there is like conflicting viewpoints. So but it can differ from company to company and people to people and places to places, where, how can this be effective, sort of things.
Are you thinking of a physical office now that you're kind of growing fast, and now that you have an enterprise edition?
Yeah.
Are you thinking of a physical office?
Yeah, I mean, it's an experiment for now. We're just thinking how it's going to look like and just play around with the concept. If it clicks, and I have a hunch that it will, yeah, setting up an office is a plan.
Okay. And what are the future plans for Hoppscotch? Where do you see yourself going from here?
Yeah. So in terms of what Hoppscotch is going, again, as I said, going back, our mission to be an ecosystem, which means a set of tools which all work together to do to help you out in every aspect of the API development. And that is something what you're focusing on, and we are just getting started there. Like, Enterprise Edition is there to kind of support us and for us to have communication with people meanwhile, but the engineering is never done.
Yeah.
Right? We are always kind of going. A lot of the things which we had tackled so far, our mission was to kind of get all of those things matured. And now I feel like we are on that stage. We are kind of confident about the testing part. The next parts which we are kind of planning to tackle, we are starting the early work on this quarter, but we are hoping to have something shown by like Q1 2024, is things regarding documentation, which is the next phase. So once you have built APIs and that sort of stuff, how will you document these things? How will you share it with the people and collaborate? And that's the next set of features which you're working on. Alongside that, increasing the depth of the individual things which we actually offer right now. Those are the two main things which we are going for right now.
And have you also started thinking about raising the next round of venture capital?
Not at the moment. Again, we always set objectives for ourselves, right? Where we should be, and I would say Hoppscotch is not there yet. Before we think about the current funding situation, it is good, and we have a healthy runway in front of us, so it's fine. We are not thinking about it really hard at the moment. But maybe soon, after sometime 2024 later, maybe we'll think about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I really found interesting about Hoppscotch is that, there are very few Indian open source projects which are, as popular as Hoppscotch.
Yeah.
And I think at some point in time, we have to create, as a country, our own open source project. We are today the third most active country on GitHub. But that's in terms of consumption, not in terms of contributing back to the global open source community. So this is, you guys are a homegrown open source project, a homegrown open source company operating from Kerala. So I really hope that your tribe of open source projects out of India, tribe of open source companies emerging out of India grows rapidly. At FOSS United, we are very happy to see companies like yours succeed. So with that, thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us, and all the best to you and your team at Hoppscotch.
Yeah, thank you.